Lauren Brown is an award-winning artist who combines her love of storytelling with her digital illustrations to draw the viewer into a whimsical and fantastical realms. She loves representing the union of nature, humanity, and motion into a single image. Join us today as we sit down with our co-host Lauren Brown for a roundtable conversation covering her early beginnings and career as a professional artist. Welcome to the Painted in Color podcast. I'm your co-host, Eric Wilkerson. Today we're speaking with illustrator and game developer Lauren Brown, who is based in Austin, Texas. So let's just dive right in. And Lauren, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? When did you, specifically, I guess we should start with, when did you decide to be an artist? What made you decide this as a career?
This career. I actually have been drawing forever. Um, since I can remember, since I could ever hold a pencil, I would draw on the walls, on my sister's homework, on any surface I could get my hands on. Um, I don't know. I always had just like ideas in my head that I needed to get out on paper, but it wasn't really until I knew or I understood that animation and games were made by actual people that I realized that the things that I love to consume and the things that I wanted to watch so much and play so much were things that a team of people had to create and make, and that it was something that could be viable for me to pursue. And so I think that's when I had first realized I was like, oh, okay, like I could actually start to, build myself towards this and start to make myself into somebody who could actually make one of these shows and inspire other people like how I felt so inspired by these, these various TV shows, this anime, these video games that I played. And so that's, it was around I think maybe middle school and high school when I realized that, there's so many various different career paths out there to be an artist. And the tricky part too was just like figuring out which field I even wanted to go into. Like there was the possibility of illustration or, doing gallery work or, video games or animation or, visual development. Like there were so many different paths. And so I didn't quite know how to choose. And I still honestly don't quite know how to choose. So I think that's how, just how I got my start. It's just, understanding that these things require people to make them.
Right on. Anybody else want to?
Yeah, actually, I know that your dad was a fashion designer, and like you actually have said before too that both of your parents were super supportive of you choosing art, and that's not always the story that artists can tell, unfortunately. But what was that like to have your parents just completely supportive of what you really wanted to do?
Yeah, it was really encouraging actually. Yeah, like Mia said, my dad he was a fashion designer, he used to do it. And being able to grow up in an environment where creativity was so encouraged, like I remember distinctly like, helping my dad pick out his ties because he's colorblind. And so just like understanding how colors match together and him teaching me how to draw like the bend in a tail of a dinosaur and the side profile of a dog, just like all these things were so accepted in my household. And I know, especially, in the Black community, that kind of thing can tend to be rare just because we have, just like, I think, and this is going to be very, very candid, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that it's difficult because we haven't seen that much representation in the field of art in general. And so when I was younger, I couldn't think really of one Black artist to kind of call on as like my standard for, somebody I could look up to and say, like, they're doing that. Like, I can totally do that too, because that face is there doing the thing that I want to do. Like a lot of like, Black kids that didn't have that case to make. And I think that makes it difficult for parents to see it as a viable career because truth be told, this is a hard, it's a hard career to pursue and it requires a lot of work. And it takes a long time to build yourself up to that point. And so I think that, like I was really lucky in that sense that one of my parents were already in a creative field. So, so that I got that encouragement at a young age. I don't think that anybody could have discouraged the art out of me, just like knowing how I am. But it would have been a lot harder if I didn't have my parents to really, to push me on and like enroll me in, classes and get me into, the advertising art program in high school. It was a vocational school that was separate from where my brother and sister had gone. And I remember when I was in middle school, just being so angry that my mom was enrolling me in this high school that wasn't, the same one, because I just wanted to be with my siblings. But, I thought that she didn't think I was tough enough to deal with like Willingboro High School. But in reality, it was just because this high school had a dedicated career major to advertising, art, and design, which was mostly, there to teach illustration, graphic design, and just basically how to, be a successful artist even without a college degree. And so I'm really thankful that my mom, sent me there anyway, because she knew basically what was best. And, I wish that a lot more people could have that kind of background and upbringing. Like I was really lucky in a lot of ways. Like I even had a best friend who I met when I was like in second grade who was also an artist. And we spent all of our time together. And so it was that community also of just like somebody there to always like keep encouraging you to build yourself up and get better and to improve and discover new things together. It was really a combination of a lot of things that ended up working really well in my favor. And I'm grateful for that every day. And, so that's basically, where I came from and that's what they did to encourage me and support me. So, I'm really appreciative of all of that.
Nice. Yeah, and that actually segues into like a perfect kind of like chronology of like you ended up going to art school, right? Like art uni or college. You went to
Yeah.
SCAD. So, like what was your experience with that? Like now, knowing that like this is the path to go, right? This is the path to go. What was like your experience there and what were the pros and cons as it ties into like as you reflect back now in your career.
Yeah, like I said before, I think that my high school did try to prepare us for being able to get into the art industry without a degree, but I know that I wasn't ready for it yet. Ultimately, I'm glad that I went to school. I guess for pros, the community of people that you meet there and what you learn from your peers is probably the biggest pro I could list out, just like hands down. It's definitely the most I got out of an experience before. Just like the people who I met there are lifelong friends, and I would not be who I am today without their influence and support. And like there's a lot of people in my background that like has built me up. In particular, there's one person who like forced me to come out of my shell because I was a little bit like introverted and a bit of a pushover as well. And like she would like push my buttons often. She'd be like, like, don't let me talk to you like that. And I'm like, you know what? I shouldn't let you talk to me like that. That's right. And like, it started to learn how to just basically develop myself and stick up for myself and fully express myself without holding anything back. And having that influence there was really, really helpful. So, just the experience of learning alongside people who really want to get better and who want to learn and who want to grow and just discover new things about the world was really, really beneficial to just everything that I've, I guess, built myself up to try to be. And, also just like having access to resources, having access to programs, the speakers they would bring in, they would encourage you to interview, various different artists, which was always really cool to learn from them. Education. I went to undergrad at Montclair State University and then grad school at Savannah College of Art and Design. And, I really enjoyed Montclair, but there was a lot of things that were missing from that education too. They told me that it was going to be an illustration/animation dual degree, and the animation part didn't start yet. So I didn't really get the animation component of that education. But then going to SCAD, there was a huge animation program there, and I didn't take any classes in animation, but I got to work on a bunch of student films. So that experience was super beneficial to getting me prepared for actually working in the industry, more than anything else. So those were the big pros of it. But obviously there's some cons, and the biggest con really is the con of student loans. Double entendre, see what I did there. But you know, that's something that has been a burden over my head for the past you know, was it 9 years? I've been out of school for 9 years now. And you know, it's held me back from doing a lot of things that I've wanted to do. And they really don't tell you how student loans work when you're an 18-year-old. You know, I was like, one of my friends said it best. They're just like, they wouldn't let anybody, you know, put down a loan on a house who's 18 years old with no experience in life and no job or anything like that. They would never let them do that. So why do they let young students do this where they can take out $100,000 and, you know, just like, okay, now you're out in the world, take care of this, good luck. And just with no preparation whatsoever. So that's been a constant struggle, is just, you know, dealing with, you know, just like the student loans and everything. Sometimes I'm trying to think of another con, like the education can tend to be outdated if the professors have been in their position for too long. I did find that when I went to SCAD and illustration, I didn't know exactly which part of illustration I wanted to do. And it turned out that what I was looking for was actually visual development. I wanted to learn how to be a viz dev artist in animation. And the illustration major didn't really know enough to place me and say, hey, actually, you might want to check out some of these classes in animation. They might have what you're looking for. You know, it was more like editorial, like publication, and things like that. And I was like, I don't really necessarily want to work for, you know, a magazine or a newspaper or anything like that. I kind of just, you know, want to work in production, but I don't want to actually animate. So, you know, like there was a lot of confusion there. And I was lost for a while for my first year until I went into the animation department and realized that, oh, over here is the thing I actually want to do. I found it. But with that being said, there was a lot of things in illustration that I wanted to take from it too, but I just didn't know how to quite hone myself to fit in that market, because everybody who was in that department was so different than I was. So I felt kind of just adrift for a while, and I wish that there was somebody there that could guide me, that had some understanding into how these industries kind of interact with each other. And so that's something that I probably could have found out a lot easier. You know, if I had, I don't know, like leveraged maybe, you know, just like using resources on the internet more, or just like understanding like more videos, or, you know, taking a class like that was online, etc. So, you know, that was an unfortunate side effect, but I ended up finding out what I wanted to do anyway, just because I explored around enough that I stumbled upon it. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of different benefits and drawbacks from going to school, but ultimately I honestly think it's up to the individual person what works best for them. I think what I would recommend to people who are considering college versus no college is, if you're the type of person to be self-motivated enough to study on your own without requiring that structure, but that you're also, you know, kind of bold enough to go out there, go to conventions and talk to other artists and kind of get yourself in that network. Because if you can't do those two things, it's not going to be easy for you to gear yourself to an independent career as an artist, or, you know, even to get into the studios, because the network is a really, really important thing to build up. You know, this is how the industry has been built, unfortunately. But if you're a person who has acknowledged that, then, you know, like maybe you should go to college and you try to get your general ed classes cleared out at a community college before you go, so you can only take art classes, you know, go what you're there for. That would be like, that's like my advice of like pros and cons versus college. But yeah.
Nobody ever told me about the networking part of college or after college. Like, I went in thinking, well, I'm just going to learn how to paint the best I can, learn how to draw and do all this stuff so I can compose an image. And then I'm going to just apply for jobs like I see people do in the movies. Like you do school and then you get out and but I didn't think that, oh, I should actually be friends with my teachers or go to this party at the Society of Illustrators and mingle with some art director that I've never met before, because like people hire their friends. And I remember calling my dad and saying, it's not enough. It's not enough to know how to paint and do this stuff. I got to be their buddy. He says, yeah, welcome to America.
Gotta be a people person.
Oh man.
But it's like, and it's such an antithesis to like a lot of artists too, because most of us just want to be in our, just hold up in our, studio or wherever, and just be in our own head so that we can create. Like a lot of us really don't want to have to mangle and do all these things and have to build up those skills in order to talk to people successfully. But unfortunately, it's something that, unless like, your art is just screaming to just speak for itself and like kind of making it through all the noise that is on the internet and, on Twitter and all these other social media platforms, unless you're getting really, really noticed online, it's going to be really, really hard without knowing anybody. It's not impossible for sure, but it's a huge help to have your network. And yeah, SCAD especially gave me a huge one. I mean, I had a friend who sent me like a list of recruiters just like in LA, and there just was like, hey, if you want to move here, I have a whole list of people that you can call. And you can just like try to apply at any studio you want to. I think you'd be really cool over here. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. I don't know why I deserve this. That's amazing. Thank you. Also, I don't want to go to LA. So I'm sorry that this is useless. It was amazing.
When I was in school, I remember being told that art colleges on the East Coast were focused more on publishing, editorial, animation. I mean, Florida had a couple of animation centric colleges, mainly because back in the 90s, Walt Disney Feature Animation had a Florida branch that they ended up closing. But I mean, for a while it was there. But if you wanted to do movies, work in visual development for TV, for movies, animation, anything like that, you had to go to a college out in California. You had to go to, Art Center or what is it? Cal Arts.
Yeah, Cal Arts.
And I mean, it's almost seems like Cal Arts is the place if you want to try to get into Pixar or something like that. I've read that they're looking just that, and that at that college, so many graduates end up from that one school end up going to Pixar. So you think, okay, well, if that's your dream, that's your goal, then you have to pick one of these expensive colleges on the other side of the country, or depending on where you are in the world. But it worked out for you. So
you don't have to do that.
You don't have to now. It's clear.
SCAD definitely is a big one. I mean, I have friends who went there with me who now work at DreamWorks and Pixar and Nickelodeon, like all these other studios on the West Coast, but it requires you to move to the West Coast. And gosh, like that, I mean, that state it has a lot of amazing studios there, but unfortunately it's also so expensive and so difficult to, just kind of like make your way. If you don't find a place for you to go, it's just like you're pretty much screwed. Like you have to leave and go somewhere else because it's so difficult to support yourself in a place like that. And actually Austin, Texas is getting an influx of people from California because the cost of living is just so high. Now they're driving up our cost of living, which a lot of native Austinites are really mad about. But, it's kind of what happens when things get oversaturated. And so, I wish that this wasn't always touted as like the only option for people to be able to be successful is to go to these specific schools and then go to the West Coast. There's only one state that you can be successful in. Like I'm starting to see a bit more of an expansion of studios around the country now. And I think that there's a lot more options out there for people to explore. But it's still not as big as California, but it's getting there. And like it can be discouraging at first, but if you find your niche or you find where you belong, I think that is possible for sure.
I wanted to double back on something you said a bit earlier, though, about being like, we were talking about having connections and like how important that is and how nobody tells you that as an artist. And then you also said that you're an introvert, which I don't believe, because you're just so natural. And like I was so awkward like when I was in art school. And I guess I'm wondering, were you, I mean, you did say that you were kind of awkward and you had a friend that was like getting you out of your shell, but like, what was that transition like? Like, I honestly think like people skills are skills, right? It's just like anything else. It's just practice, and it's like it's being around people and stuff. But what was that? I guess like what advice would you give to somebody who's like a super introvert and they want to get into these industries and they're seeing you being supernatural and they're like, I can never be like that. Like, I don't know, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, I think like it's funny because like it's a lot of people don't think that I'm an introvert, and I'm so an introvert. I'm so much of an introvert. Like this pandemic has been awful, but honestly, I've been vibing at home. Like, I'm just like, oh, I'm in my own headspace. I get to be in my own office and work, and this is really nice. I gain energy when I'm alone. But when I get to talk to people who are like-minded and are interested in similar things that I am in, I gain my energy from conversations like that, from talking to you three, from talking to other artists, because it's just something that really gets me excited. And I feel like that's when my natural self comes out, and that's why I like to ask people what they're excited about, what they're passionate about, because you see them light up and you get to see them really come out of their shell. It loosens them up a lot. And so I think that's really important to just like try to have conversations about things that you can talk about first, because starting on hard mode where you're trying to talk about something like sports, it's not really going to be a fun time for you. But if you can talk to another artist about just being an artist and the experience that you have, that's a natural conversation because you're speaking from experience. You don't have to make up anything. So it's just really about just kind of understanding what your boundaries are. If you're not feeling super comfortable, then observing is fine too. Learning from other people and how they speak to each other is actually a really good skill to just like kind of build yourself up to get ready for that. I think I was actually really, I used to be really nervous about public speaking and really nervous about just like speaking to strangers in general. But two things happened that helped me get out of my shell. And the first thing is that person I mentioned before, her name is Danielle Mullins, we call her Mullins. She, watching her and how natural she could be with anybody was really inspiring to me, because I'm just like, oh, like you can just like go up to somebody and just start talking to them. And if you find a thing that they're interested in, you can just keep having a conversation. That's weird. And the second thing is actually this speech class that I took in undergrad. It was just like one of those general education classes, but it forced you to get up and speak to people about, something that you're trying to debate them on or something that you're trying to convince them of. And I think that just like, that got me out of my shell because I was so uncomfortable, but I had to overcome that challenge. And then after that, I was like, well, if I get to get in front of people and talk about things that I actually enjoy, then it's got to be a lot easier than this. And so it was, and so I started to kind of force myself to be in more situations like that, where I would do panels at, different conventions and, just get in front of people and speak to them. And it kind of got me used to just kind of letting myself open up and letting myself be vulnerable and just be authentic. But that's really what the advice I give to anybody who's nervous about talking to other people is just be your authentic self. And if somebody doesn't vibe with you, it's okay. Find the people who do, because those are going to be the ones who are kind of the best to talk to and the best to start with. And if you go to any convention, you'll find if you're an artist, there's something to talk about, guaranteed. It's easy. It's a great starting ground. So, it can be scary at first, but remember, if you have any idols out there, any people that you really admire, they're people too. They have insecurities and struggles too, So I remember going to Dragon Con and meeting Corey Godby for the first time. And, I love his art, just like his wonderful style, whimsical, everything that I wanted to be. And I just went up and talked to him. I was like, oh, I'm a big fan. I really like your art. And he was like, oh yeah, thank you. Are you an artist too? And, I showed him, it was actually this picture behind me that was on the back of my business card. And he was like, you should be tabling here. Like, what? Like, why aren't you here? And I'm like, what? Corey Godby is telling me this? And, you know, I just had a conversation with him and just started talking to him about his sketchbooks and his process. And, you know, like just realizing that he's just a person, that all these people who are maybe been in the industry for 20, 30 years are all people. And they all also weirdly have imposter syndrome. I don't know what that is. So many of us have it. Understanding that really made me a lot more comfortable with talking to people.
Word up. That actually led to a question that I was kind of curious about as we were kind of discussing, you know, meeting a lot of artists in terms of like even networking and going to all these cons, you know, like were those experiences, did that help feed into like your artist career? Like, you know, fostering it, you know, like you just say as an introvert, you know, you don't really get to, you know, you don't need to be recharged by the presence of people or whatnot, but you know, as you've said that you've got to like Dragon Con and talking to, you know, the rock stars that you've that were in your mind, have those interactions like help, you know, help you become the artist you are today?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, conventions were really formative to me. I mean, I first became an attendee at conventions back in 2003 at Otakon in Baltimore, and I didn't know that people did that people dressed up and that people like would sell their art at tables, and it opened my mind completely, it blew my mind. And so I didn't think for a long time that I was even capable of doing something like that, where I could just sell my work and, you know, be brave enough to go to a place and do it. And it took me a long time. I mean, I didn't start selling my work at conventions until 2011. You know, after that first experience going to Otakon, like I hadn't even thought about doing it. But I ended up being almost like not really forced into it, but the opportunity was there. And so I took it because like somebody needed somebody to share a table with me. And so I was like, okay, I'll go up and make a bunch of art. And I banged out a bunch of art for a table in a month. Just made inventory, got a cheap laminator, made some bookmarks, made some keychains, you know, tried to make some prints. And when I first went there, I think, I don't know, I made like $500. I was like really excited about it. It like just covered like, you know, our trip up there. But just the idea of people handing me money for a thing I made, that feeling was a feeling that I could not stop chasing. I was like, I have physical money in my hand. This is amazing. But it's not only that, it's just like the fact that people were so excited to see what I created, like what somebody created at these conventions. You know, you could have a conversation about like, oh, you like, you know, Studio Ghibli too, or you like what did you draw back? Oh, you like Pokemon too. You know, you could just have a conversation with anybody, just complete strangers, because you know we're all here as a base point. We're passionate about the same thing, and it helped me kind of see and understand the community that was out there, and really helped me understand that, you know, I'm not just a person, but also a business and a brand, and that my art is catering to a specific audience, and that audience is happy to support that art, and I should make more of it. And, you know, it was, I don't know, it was really eye-opening to just like want to have that desire to start, you know, my own thing and the Etsy store that I have now, to just be able to provide for that audience. Because as I kept going back to the same conventions each year, you know, people would come back to my table and they would be like, oh, I was hoping I would see you this year. Or if I had to miss a year, they're just like, oh, I couldn't find you last year, but I'm really glad you're here this time. And I'm like, I have people who like remember me. Like, this is crazy. And it's really heartening to see that, like that somebody was looking forward to seeing the art that I made. It was a game changer. And so it just encouraged me to want to put more of my work out there, because, you know, like it's not just for me, but it's to help other people. And the idea that anything I could make could inspire somebody else was really, really also encouraging. And so, yeah, like I just think it was you know, it was a lot of fun. It was amazing. This amazing community of artists out there. You know, I wouldn't have met, you know, Mia if it wasn't for Gen Con. And like a ton of other people who I'm really close friends with now. Just my favorite days were the Sunday art trades. Like you just like go around to everybody and just, you know, just get to know your artists that you're there with. You know, it's a big community and it's amazing. And I really missed it this year because it's, you know, it's like a weekend of just mayhem and insanity, but also just the most heartening thing ever. Then you go and collapse, you know, for a whole week afterwards because you're exhausted. Because you have to be on the entire weekend and it's hard. Mia's like,
I'm getting flashbacks.
I can see the empathy, Mia.
Salesperson. You have to be a salesperson. You're not an artist when you show up at these conventions.
You have to be a salesperson.
You have to be a salesperson. It's death for anybody that just sits there and goes, well, I'm just going to bury myself in my sketchbook. Here it is. Just toss money in the bucket or something. You know, you have to sell yourself. You
don't even hand things to me. Just toss it in the bucket.
Honestly, because they'll just walk past you and think they're going to disturb you if you're buried or looking down or not making eye contact. It's a weird thing, but you had said that you did your first convention in 2011.
Yeah.
So did you have an online presence before that?
Well, I mean, I did kind of, but I wouldn't say a presence. It was very small.
So you had a website?
I had a website. I had, and I had at that point, my art was really only on DeviantArt. So that was like really my only socials, but yeah, like I didn't really have a big following. I still don't really have a big following, let's be real, but there's more people who know me now than before. But yeah, before I didn't have a like.
So when did you think that ball started rolling where you made a conscious effort to put your work online and get it out there for people to see, like after that first convention?
It was actually shortly after that. So I moved to Atlanta in 2011 as well. That was when I first started in the animation industry after graduating SCAD. And so that was at that point, it was after I had done my first convention. And I was realizing that there were people who wanted to see more from me. And so I started a Tumblr. Tumblr was the first like real, like, you know, social media that my art was on. And I still remember, you know, I would post the things that I worked really hard on, you know, like my fancy illustrations and stuff that I really was proud of. But the thing that got me the most notice when I was starting Tumblr was the series. It was so stupid. The series of like these squishy, like Tari Panda, if anybody knows what that is, where it's like a little like bean-headed panda laying down. I did a series of Pokemon like that, just like in piles with their evolutions stacked on top of each other. And that became super popular. I don't know why. And so that's when I really started getting my following. You know, just if you're listening, anybody's listening, fan art, unfortunately, it really does get you noticed. I always say, like, you know, it's always like nice to do fan art and then kind of track them with like the really good art that keeps them there. But that definitely happened where the fan art stuff that I was doing got a lot of attention. And then I was like selling them as like, you know, those little magnets and stickers at subsequent conventions. And people were like, oh, I saw these online. This is so cool. And so people would notice me and then they would look around my table and everything else would come into focus. And they were like, oh, okay, I want to buy this stuff too. And, you know, and so that was kind of like how I got my social media presence more or less started. As far as Instagram and Twitter, I'm still like, I'm newer to those. Twitter, I still can't get my head around, but Instagram has gotten a lot better. But yeah, Tumblr, you know, like I miss that as a platform because that was where my audience had basically really started. And I was sad that it kind of tanked itself, but you know, it is what it is. I have to learn how to adapt now to the other social media platforms. But yeah, it was really a good vehicle to just get me to communicate with other people and people who liked my work and other artists. But as I'm thinking about it, another thing too, with the person that I used to be a person who didn't like to impose on other people and didn't like to kind of like go on about the things that I was thinking about or that I was interested in or that I was, you know, like why I made a certain piece. I didn't want to make a long explanation for it. I realized that people are actually really into that. They actually really like when they understand the backstory about what you're creating. And that kind of also made me realize that it's okay to tell a story with everything that I'm making. And it's okay to kind of like let them into my world a little bit in terms of social media. Because right now I'm doing like an October drawing challenge called 31 Boutiques. And it's like, you know, like with each piece, I'm like realizing that like, oh, I can probably incorporate one of my worlds into this a little bit more and just kind of make a backstory. And people engage with it and they're excited about it. And I'm like, huh, like that's people actually, they want to listen to what I have to say. That's odd. Maybe I should do that a little bit more. And so, you know, like who knew? Who would have thunk it? But, you know, I saw people doing that at Gen Con where they would really go into explaining their art, you know, and there was an audience around their table who would listen to that explanation. They'd be there for the whole thing. And so I was realizing that there really is no shame in kind of opening yourself up to that level of vulnerability as well, where you're okay with talking about your ideas and your inspirations and why you made what you made. It invites them into who you are and into your world and into your artwork a lot more. And that's what I'm learning now. That's my new lesson. And so I'm working on building that up now. Now that like I see that
something that definitely takes practice.
It does.
Because you could have random person just walk up to your table or even online and ask you, what's this about? What's the story? That's what's going to engage them. And I think about HGTV, for example. Like there's a whole network dedicated to documentaries of how somebody built a house or, you know, renovated an apartment or something like that. And you think that's really boring, but then you watch it and you're like,
it's so entertaining.
Binge the whole day away watching this. You're like, oh man, I wonder what this house is going to look like. But people are there for the stories. So, and you never know who's going to walk up, especially at conventions. You never know who's going to walk up to your table. It could be somebody from Nickelodeon. It could be random producer, but they might have their name tag flipped, so you'd never know. And if you present yourself, your whole passionate self, and say, well, this is what it's all about, and I had so much fun creating this content and this character, and I did this blah blah blah, and then they're like, oh well, here's my business card, and you go, oh my god. You know, like, those things happen to people. So
and it happened at Gen Con a lot too, because I mean, I got a bunch of different freelance projects. Like, you know, I was working on this card game that just had a Kickstarter called Deck of Wonders, and I'm working on the second half of that now. But like, that's where he found me, was at Gen Con. And it was because, you know, I talked about this a little bit in other, you know, interviews, but at Gen Con, you know, I was really nervous about presenting my authentic self because there were so many artists that were different from me. But I was kind of backed into a corner and just realized, I'm like, okay, at some point you have to accept that they did not accept you by accident. It wasn't a mistake that you're here. And so if they're wanting what you do, maybe you should show what you do. You're silly for thinking otherwise. Please stop and put your art up. And so I did. And it got me, you know, it got a lot of notice because it was for me that people were talking to me. It was for me that people were asking me to do these projects. You know, like the way the creator of that card game says, he was just like, he's like, I saw her table and I realized that that's the style that I wanted my game to be in. And I'm like, that's really cool. And, you know, if I had tried to change myself or adjust myself and adapt, like it would not have worked out the same way, and something would have been missing and something would have been lost. And so it really did encourage me to just be like, you know, like it's okay to be who you are and to like kind of tell people what you're about. Because really what you're doing is inviting people into your community. You're making a community around your own business and your brand, and you make them feel like they're a part of that community by opening up to them and telling them what you're all about. And so, you know, that's something that I'm now going to continue to put into practice when conventions start up again, because I realize how effective of a tool that is, and, you know, and how much it helps me get to understand, you know, why you made something helps other people to get to understand you as an artist. And, you know, like when I was walking around and like seeing other artists do this, I learned something about them too. And I felt drawn into their world, and I realized the effect that has on people. So it really is important to be able to do that. And it is a skill. So it's something that does need to be practiced, but I'm getting more used to talking about myself and my work as time goes on. So eventually it'll become second nature, I hope. I hope.
So you had talked about, all right, so you went to school, started doing conventions,
Mhm.
started making some money, putting your stuff online. So where in there, because I know you've done staff and freelance.
Yeah.
So at what point did you, like after school, did you land that first staff art job? Was that before the convention stuff, or was it
Shortly after, but
okay?
I can't say it wasn't because of the convention, though it easily could have been too. Like I don't know, but like it's definitely a way to get noticed for sure, but that's just not how it happened for me. So what had happened was, I feel like it was a stroke of luck, but it was also just because I was trying to grind. Esther, what'd you say?
It's not. It's never a stroke of luck, dude.
That's true. I know, you're right. So when I graduated SCAD, I was considering going back home to Jersey to just like, you know, I just go back home and just, you know, live there for a little bit while I look for a job. But I realized that I didn't want to leave that environment, and I wanted to stay in a place that I felt like creatively charged and inspired. So I, you know, opted to stay at SCAD for the summer. And during that summer, I built up my portfolio a lot just based off of what I learned, especially on working on all those student films. I did a bunch of character designs, you know, like turnarounds and things like that, and started putting my work on freelance websites just to start, you know, working, you know, for those jobs. And so during that summer, after that convention, I just kept like hustling and trying to put my stuff out there. And one day in August, I got an email from a background director at Floyd County Productions, which is an animation studio in Atlanta. And she was like, hey, I saw your work on this freelance website. And, you know, I saw that you're located in Georgia. And I was wondering if you were interested in taking an art test and applying to, you know, this job. It's, you know, it's for the studio that, you know, we make Archer and we make other animated TV shows. And I saw this email. I still remember the feeling and where I was when I saw it, because I was just like, what? I couldn't believe it. And so, you know, I was like, yes, I would absolutely love to, you know, take an art test. And I basically got this 24-hour art test. I had to turn it around in 24 hours and or at least spend 24 hours on it, I think. But I took that as spend a full day on it and don't sleep. And so that's what I did. I banged out the art test. I went to my job at CVS the next day, and you know, I put my all into that test. I wanted to make sure that it was good. And so, you know, also serendipitously, a few weeks later was a convention called DragonCon in Atlanta. And, you know, I emailed her and told her, it's like, hey, like, you know, I'm going to be in the area actually in, you know, in a few days. So I was wondering if I could, you know, just like check out the studio and just see where you guys work. And she was like, okay, like, yeah, that's totally fine. It's like, oh, you're in town I was like afraid to say that I was in town for DragonCon for some reason, like they would care. And she was like, oh, you must be in town for DragonCon. Like, yeah, come by. And, you know, let me show you. And when I walked into that studio environment, it was so much like the environment that I felt at SCAD, and it felt familiar. And that was the moment where I was like, I think I could actually do this. I think this is actually really a good fit, because I was just doing this. You know, that experience of working collaboratively on a film, and each person has their roles. And I was a background artist and a character designer for people. And it was that simulated that environment so perfectly that transitioning over was really, really smooth, you know. And so I got the acceptance email. They were like, hey, like, we really liked your art test. You know, we want to hire you. When can you move out here? And so, you know, 2 weeks later, I moved out to Atlanta, and that's when I got my start. And, you know, it was difficult and it was grueling, but it was also amazing to be able to work in a studio like that. And it did feel familiar. I was like, oh, this feels like college again. This is great, but only I'm an adult now and supporting myself, and I'm at the next stage. So that's basically how it all started.
And you won an Emmy.
And I won an Emmy.
I was almost
by the way,
I was almost going to introduce you as
I knew you were going to. I knew you were thinking about it.
But I said, you know what? I teased her enough about that, so I'm not going to toss that in there. But technically, if we're going to introduce Lauren, we got to say the whole name.
Gotta do the whole thing.
Lauren Brown, not artist, but Emmy Award winning. I like that multiple people have thought to do that. Just like,
I mean, I don't know anyone in real life. I mean, maybe some people I don't know, but like you're the closest person I know that's won an Emmy. That's a big deal. That's huge. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was actually shortly before I left the studio too. It was like literally the last episode I worked on before I moved to Austin. But yeah, it was on Archer season 7, episode 1. And I mean, it's an amazing show, and it fully deserved winning it. But we worked really hard at that studio. We worked really hard on those shows. So yeah, it was something I miss about just like being a frontline artist, of just kind of like getting better every day, because you're doing it 8 hours a day constantly, and you're doing it alongside people. So there's a standard that you need to make sure that you are adhering to. And it helps you learn a lot, and it helps you get better. But my career has, I'm still an artist, but it's kind of like advanced now. So I don't really get to do that anymore. It's a different learning experience. So yeah.
I know I talked to students about career paths and staff versus freelance, or should you be totally freelance, or I mean, and it also has a lot to do with the type of personality the person has, whether they're an introvert or an extrovert, or if they really like that team atmosphere or not. But I think you actually answered the next question I was going to ask you, which is, which do you prefer, staff or freelance?
That's an interesting question, because I haven't had a chance to do freelance full time, so I can't fully say if I prefer it over doing staff. But I will say that I enjoy the stability of being able to be an artist who works full time at a studio, because it's guaranteed. You know what you're going to get every 2 weeks. You know what you're there to do. You get to learn and grow and meet all these people in the industry. And once you get your foot in the industry, that web expands for you a lot, because this world is so small. So, it adds security in a myriad of ways, especially as somebody who was burdened with a bunch of student loans. Knowing that I had a steady paycheck coming from somewhere was always really encouraging, because I knew that I wasn't going to be left out in the cold if something went wrong. Like I had something to kind of like rely on. And so, I do like that a lot, but I also like the freedom and flexibility of what it means to full-time freelance. But with that comes, kind of that more uncertainty. You don't quite know all the time, if you don't have like a constant project going on, where that next paycheck is coming from. You really have to hustle and work really hard. But the reason why I do both at the same time was largely in part because of my student loans, but also because I realized that as a staff artist, it's funny that you call it staff, because I just call it full time. We have different terminology for it. But as a full-time artist, it's also really difficult to continue to keep doing your personal art after you're done your shift at work. And to find that motivation and to find that drive to continue is really difficult. You burn out really easily if you keep doing that. But me being me, I was like, well, I can't let myself stagnate. I can't let myself not do my own personal art. So I'm going to force myself to do art outside of work. And so that's part of the reason why I started signing up for more conventions, because conventions were a way to get me to do my own personal art and make and sell that. And then freelance was a way to make extra money to help pay off my loans while doing, more art for my portfolio. And so basically, like my entire career has been forcing myself to keep making the thing, probably to my detriment. I deal with burnout pretty frequently, and I have to keep pushing through regardless, because that's what I have to do. But this is coming up on a cusp of a week off. But
let me ask you then, how do you juggle the work-life balance then? Because you're doing a 40-hour week, or maybe 50-hour week, maybe, I don't know, plus freelance, plus personal work. Like,
Rip.
where does Lauren the person step in and push Lauren the artist aside so that Lauren the person can unwind and detox and be stress free and all that? I mean, like, because I want to know for myself. Like, what do you do? Because I'm up until like 1 a.m. trying to make this stuff work, and then nodding off in the day. But like, you can't do that because you got people like, is she sleeping?
Yeah. And I'm an associate art director for anybody who doesn't know. So I actually have to manage people and I have to be in meetings all day too. So I have to be on all day. And so it's even like, where does Lauren the person, who is she? I don't know her. I'm kidding. I do. So I made a concerted effort to even during this pandemic, I make a concerted effort to try to be social and try not to drown myself in work and not do anything else. So, I would try to budget my time accordingly, or at least after work is over, what I would do is give myself at least 2 hours to just decompress, to do nothing, to cook dinner, watch TV, and just give myself that like lead time before I would start working on any freelance project that I had going on. What I would also do is make sure that Mondays and Fridays are days that I do not do any freelance after work, so I can just have those evenings to myself. And, then Saturday and Sunday, I would do my freelance projects and try to catch up on anything that I didn't get to do during the week. And that's usually at night because I work better at night. And during the day, that's when I would hang out with people, or, if I had to hang out later at night, I would do that. During the pandemic, I've stayed connected with people just over Zoom, playing D&D, lots of D&D, so much D&D. That we have like a story night where I would like just I just do my freelance and, screen record and everything like that, or screen share with other people, hold myself accountable. But also just to make sure that I am taking time for myself to actually decompress. There are some times where I try my hardest to just work and I can't do it. And the reason I can't do it is because I'm burned out. And when that happens, I have learned that I cannot force myself to try because it's not going to be good. And instead, what I do is I just put it away. I go away from my office and I go downstairs and just relax and let myself be myself and just decompress and let myself sit for a while. I come from a family of really hardworking people, and my mom in particular is somebody who does not know how to sit still. And that's where I learned it from you, Mom. I'm sure she's watching when this is out. I learned it from her, but I'm realizing that you cannot continue to draw from a well that is dry because nothing is going to come out of it. So I realized that I need to just kind of take my breaks and just let myself, be like walk outside, be in nature, let myself be inspired by other things that are around me. I'm very much into plants. So if I'm not feeling it a certain day or like on a Saturday, I just, go into my patio, like start repotting succulents and arrange them in a way that makes me happy. Just get away from my art for a little bit. I think that's the biggest way that I've kept myself, relatively centered throughout all of this. But even with all of that effort, I still face burnout fairly regularly. And I think I haven't really gotten a chance to take an extended time away from everything. And so I think that's the next step to really help restore myself, is just to, vacations are real and they're needed. And I think everybody should take them no matter what situation you're in. I mean, obviously some people don't have the luxury to do so, but and I don't mean vacation in terms of like go somewhere, go travel. I just mean a concerted period of time where you're not doing your work. I think you just need time away to let your brain actually recharge and to continue to consume content that inspires you, and to do things that make you happy, because that helps you feel more fulfilled and that helps you actually come back to the drawing board when you're ready with a fresh perspective and a good mind. So that's what's next for me. I really need that for myself.
Damn.
I have a quick question, actually, because you're also talking about you're talking about like juggling a couple careers at the same time, but you've also gone from animation to being a game developer. And
Mhm.
and then obviously the personal work is another thing too. So you're like juggling different careers. And I think for a lot of young artists coming out of school, they can't even fathom getting into one, you know, industry. So what advice would you give? Like, I mean, you're young too. You're in your like early 30s. So it's just like,
Yeah.
it's not like you're 50 and you've gone through very like several career changes, you know? I just would love to hear your point of view on switching careers and stuff.
Yeah, it was actually really interesting. So the opportunity rose up for me when one of my friends had left my animation studio and went over to the gaming industry, and he was telling me all about it and how much fun he was having, and how, you know, like just like how different it was, but also just like the good things that were different. And you know, I'm also a gamer. I love video games, and so I thought that I was like, okay, this is something I've always wanted to do anyway. So I guess, you know, this is the chance for me to break into that field and see what that's all about. And and so I, you know, packed up everything and moved over to Austin, Texas. You know, once I applied and got hired. Because first off, it was great having a career and then applying to somewhere else because you don't have anything to lose. It's amazing. I recommend it for everybody. It's a great, even if you don't want to take the new job, it's a nice reminder of what you're worth, because like when you've been working somewhere for so long, you're not really sure anymore. And so to know that another place might want you is just really encouraging, just for your own ego, really. Just do it for yourself. Do yourself a favor and apply to somewhere for, you know, just for the heck of it. But no, I'm kidding. But no, it was an interesting transition because I didn't know everything all over again. I knew how to do art, but games was a different ball game. It was a lot more technical, and a lot more knowledge was required in terms of just like how to make art for this different platform. With animation, you don't really have to worry about how people are going to interact with it. All you have to do is create the art, and you know what they're going to see on the screen. But video games has a different layer. You know, there's a bunch of considerations that you have to take in mind. It's how it's, you know, how the audience is going to engage with it, how they're going to flow through everything, how something is going to function for them. Is it broken? Is it not? And so it was just it seemed really intimidating at first, but I wanted to challenge myself because I like learning new things, and I like arming myself, you know, with these new skills. And another thing that had happened that prepared me for it was when I was back at the animation studio, I had become a manager, and it was because I was asked. I never thought that there was something that I could do or something that I knew I wanted to do, but I was asked to be a lead for the background department. And the first time I was offered it, I actually said no because I was like, oh, I don't think I'm good for this. Like, you know, so I told them no. But fortunately, they didn't give up on me. And a few months later, they asked me if I wanted to background direct for a show, a short for a show on FX called The League. And that time I accepted. And I didn't feel like I was ready, but I accepted anyway. And having that experience actually was what got me over to the game studio at EA. And so like the biggest thing that I would say to people who you know, like might want to make the jump or like might want to advance in their career or anything like that is like don't do what I did. Don't like say no and think that you're not ready if somebody's asking you, because that means that like if they're asking you, that means that they saw something in you that they wanted, and they wanted to cultivate, and they wanted you to give to the team. And it's not an accident. I have to keep telling myself that it's not an accident that, you know, that these things have happened. It's not an accident that I was accepted into Gen Con. Not an accident that I was able to get, you know, a career, you know, at Floyd or at EA. You know, it was. I mean, I tried to work hard as I could, and you know, and it got me there. And you know, so I think that don't sell yourself short. Don't limit yourself. You are capable, you know, of doing this thing. Even if you don't see, you know, this representation that you want to see in the industry, or, you know, you don't think that you fit there or you belong, just try anyway. Because the worst that can happen is you get there and you realize it's not a fit for you. You can go somewhere else. It's fine. But at least try it out and see what happens. Because if I was too scared to make that change, you know, like a lot of things wouldn't have happened for me. I'm sure I wouldn't have experienced half the things that I have experienced if I held myself back from doing a lot of those things. So I think that's the advice that I would give, is just don't hold yourself back. scary, but do it anyway. What's the worst that can happen?
They're not going to risk their career. Like if they're offering you a job, they're not going to make themselves look bad just to do you a favor. You know, it's like
exactly.
I was that too. It's like
yeah, imposter syndrome is legit. It's a legit thing that people like go through, but like it's not legit in terms of like what it means for you. Like you can think of it like this: if you're feeling like you're an imposter, just lean into it. Just be like, I've tricked everybody. Look at me. I'm so cool that I tricked everybody. I'm cosplaying as a successful artist. I'm just going to pretend for a while and maybe one day it'll be true. And while you're pretending, it's true. It's just, you're not pretending. But if you need to trick yourself, that's my advice. Do that. Pretend like you're really, really cool because you're probably actually really cool. Let yourself be that imposter then. Fine, whatever. You're an evil genius. I'm like, wow, I tricked all these people into hiring me at this game studio and work on their game. They think that I'm good enough to do that. That's crazy.
Your brain works totally different from mine. If I embraced that logic, I would psych myself out so fast.
Really?
Oh man, I have to be like Will Smith level motivational speaker mentality. When I feel like that, I gotta be like, you are here for a reason. Like,
well, I've tried that, but my mind doesn't believe it. So now I have to switch tactics on it. Is what happened. I have to like in my internal monologue is constantly being me saying, stop being mean to yourself. What are you doing? Like, stop that. Be nice. Like I have to tell myself, like, be nice.
If somebody asks you to take on a role or invite you as a guest to speak at an event or whatever, it's because they know that you can do it. They saw that you know what you're talking about, mm-hmm. and that you've got the work to back it up. So if you say no, it's fear. If you say yes, then the imposter syndrome kicks in and you go, oh my God, what did I just do? I have to remind myself that they found me. They asked me. I didn't come to them saying, can I be this guest? Can I do this? Can I do that?
And even if you did, they still have to accept you. They can say no.
Right. They can say no. But I mean, if they came out, typed the fancy email and all that stuff, took the time out to ask me, then I guess I must be worth the time. Mm-hmm. And then I have to just like repeat that in my head. They took the time to write this out. Right?
Yeah. They thought of you and they were just like, hey, I think you would be good for this.
Yeah.
And your first thought shouldn't be, why though?
Like, come on. Like, is there a typo in here? They made like Enrique? No, they spelled it right.
So many times I've been like that where I'm just like, are they sure though? Like when I first got the offer from EA, I'm like, really? Like, you want to give me money? Like, that's crazy. Why do you want to fly me out to Austin? You're paying for that's crazy. But they were willing to make that investment because they saw my work and they saw who I was and they thought it was a fit, and that wasn't an accident. And you just have to accept that. But if you need to trick yourself into accepting it, then try one of those two techniques that we just lined out. It's like either just like hype yourself up or just think that you're an evil genius that's cool enough to, to trick somebody into thinking that you're good enough for them. And you're not, but it's like, if you need, that's what you need to do, then sure, why not? Whatever it is to get you out of your own head, just let yourself do it. It's okay. It is okay. So that's what I've been trying to, it's a constant struggle. And I think imposter syndrome is in place for some of the best people that I know. It's for some really talented artists. And probably it's because it's what encourages us to work harder and do even better. So it's there for a reason, but as long as it's not holding you back from doing the thing that you need to do, mm-hmm. Acknowledge it.
That's the emphasis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Don't let it psych you out into not doing it. Don't be too afraid. Like, be afraid and do it anyway.
Yeah, that's what it should be about. Levels of artistic fear.
Yeah.
And I find that's interesting. The students have it, professionals have it. it doesn't go away. It just gets a new name.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I think it was a quote from Neil Gaiman actually, that he was like at a gala of like all these really important, influential people, and he was feeling like really impostery for being there. And then he had talked to, you know, the person who was at his table with him, and the person said to him that, you know, like, wow, like I just feel like I really don't belong amongst these people who have done so many amazing things. And he was like, well, if Neil Armstrong has said that to me, then maybe I'm not so bad. Then maybe everybody goes through this thing.
yep.
And it put things into perspective a lot, you know, just like amongst talking to people at conventions who I admired for years, and, you know, just like seeing that everybody goes through this, it's, you know, it's really just, it's something that a lot of people have. So it's okay. Just move past it. Just, you know, keep it in the back of your head, but don't let it dictate what you do.
Well, I have one question that I ask friends and some students is, what would you do with your time if money were no object?
So, oh, I wish this question could be a reality that I could live. What would I do? There's so many things I want to do. I mean, I want to explore so many different fields of art. You know, and there's so little time to do so, but with money as no object, you have time now. And I would really just want to just explore everything and learn about everything. And not only that, but, you know, I have several ideas and stories that are in my head. And all I've ever wanted to do is make an art book and put those stories. I know Mia's so excited. And just put those stories in a book and have people experience it and read it. And it's a series, and it's something that I created. Because I think the reason why I, like, you know, don't introduce myself as like I'm an Emmy award-winning artist is because, you know, it was amongst a team, but the show won an Emmy, not like necessarily, I mean, I was a part of that team, but it wasn't me who made that story. It wasn't me who made that idea. And so I feel like it will be truly deserved if I actually made an idea that was deserving of an award, or like an award-winning something. You know, like that's where I put a lot of pride in, is just creating what is in my own head, something I've always wanted to do. And so that would afford me the time to do that. You know, another thing that I've always wanted to do is just have like a school or an atelier or something like that for people who want to explore the arts but don't have the funds or resources to do so, and just find those kids and just bring them in and encourage them and inspire them and really help them grow and become their best artists that they can be. That, you know, help them do something that they otherwise would not have done, and just like provide a place for them, like a safe place for them to really express themselves, was another thing that I've always wanted to do. Yeah, like, you know, when I have time on my hands and when I'm actually energized to do so, like I just love to create. And that's really all I want to do, is just make stories and make, you know, like just an illustrated novel. I've had a fascination with wordless narratives for a long time. And so that's something that I've just always wanted to do, is just make a story with no words and full immersion into this world. And, you know, just, yeah, I think that's probably
So
what.
if you paused on the freelance stuff, would
Uh-huh.
that give you the time that you needed to make one of those ideas a reality?
Maybe it would take a long time, but maybe. Perhaps. I mean, I know. No, I definitely could. I could. And I think the reason why I haven't really done it yet is because I am in kind of a state of like probably varying degrees of burnout. And so my inspiration levels like just need to be at like a little bit of a higher point for me to really like do a full deep dive into it without getting tired of what I'm working on, or being discouraged by this thing that, you know, that I've drawn. Just because I'm like, I think this could be better. I don't like this enough. I think a big part of like one of my, the imposter syndrome bit that has been holding me back is making a world and then thinking that I'm not good enough to fully realize it in the way that it deserves. And I think that's so silly, because all it is doing is just stopping me from doing a thing that I could be doing. It's stopping me from putting something out in the world, and it's stopping me from getting better at doing the thing. So I'm just realizing that I need to actually create and then determine, just like, okay, I've done it. Now it's out there. Now I can move on and make something even better. That's the worst that can happen.
Like with
So
your challenge right now that you're doing, like I see, like every night this week you've been putting out this new original drawing with like like every concept is unique, and I'm like, you can do it. You carving out the time to create an awesome piece, and it's like, so anyway, it's amazing to see that you can
thank you.
put a new piece out every day without all that you have to do.
It's a fun way to unwind, but also it's like I mean, that's part of like what I'm trying to do too, is just kind of getting myself out of like the shell of like being afraid of writing the story. I'm just trying to put snippets of that lore into each piece that I create, in a way that people can engage with it, but also they can learn a little bit more about the piece. So I'm gonna, like I want to do that for the 31 days of October. Let's see how I go. But it's been really fun to be able to do it. And it's funny because like when I create like that, I'm like, yeah, why can't I just do this all the time? But I need like a prompt and a challenge and all this. I need the pressure, around me. So I have to find a way to, organically light the fire under my butt and just get myself in gear to do that. But honestly, like it's scary to start a whole new story in a whole new world. But again, I need to not let fear hold me back, just like I told, everybody listening to not let fear hold them back.
I tend to quote Mighty Morphin Power Rangers more than anybody here ever needs to know.
I'm sorry, what?
And Zach from the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers once said, "There's nothing to it but to do it."
Nothing to it but to do it?
Nothing to it but to do it.
Nothing to it but to do it.
Afterwards.
Morphin Power Rangers.
Oh my God, that takes me back.
Love that show.
Esther's whole mind is blown now. She's like, whoa. The Black Ranger said that?
Yes. Yeah, none of the dialogue has ever stuck to me.
I don't think so either, but I do remember that quote.
Really?
I don't remember it if I look back.
I actually met the man at San Diego Comic-Con.
Really?
Alan Panicle actually photographed the moment. I was like gushing in front of this dude. I'm like, you have no idea. It was like one of many moments, but yeah, so that's my follow-up. Nothing to it but to do it.
Yeah.
So if this is something you really are passionate about, really want to do, I know like money and debts and all that stuff is like, it's overwhelming. You want to get rid of some of that stuff and before you can really focus on what you want to do.
Yeah.
But you have time. There's it's not something that you have to rush through and do a Kickstarter for or hit up a publisher for next year. Make sure you take your time, make sure you have it right. I've told Mia, like I've tried doing what you're trying to do, and every time I do it, I hear Nelson in the back of my head going, "Simpsons did it." So I mean,
like, yeah, it's true. I mean, you see, there's so many bad movies out there, right? Like, there's so many things that like are in the world that are just garbage, but they're out there. Somebody. Like, okay, I think it was a bit by Patton Oswalt actually, who was just like, somebody made Deathbed the bed that eats people, and he was like, they had to get a team together and like get a craft table like 5 a.m. and like got like lighting guys and like everybody out there to film this thing, and it's bad, but they did it, and like the fact that they did it, it's just like, okay, like then why am I holding myself back? Even if the thing is bad, I'm gonna do it anyway. I could put something out in the world and then move on and make something better. But like, why am I not doing it? It's probably not even going to be bad, honestly. Like, it'll be, like, I think that it could be something. It might be, I have people who like my work. So at least the people who like my work could see it and be like, oh, I like this too. This is cool. And even if it's not where I want it to be, it's paving the way to make a thing to make a thing that is at a point where I want it to be. And that's really all it is. Just put the thing out there, even if it's garbage, just make it. It's probably not garbage.
Do you remember Killer Clowns from Outer Space?
Oh God.
Somebody made that.
That exists.
So like you're not writing Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
And even if you are, good on you. You made it.
You made it. Like somebody is out there right
Story.
now living their best life going, that was a dope ass movie and I'm so happy I wrote it.
Yeah, it's like if you make Killer Clowns, I don't know if you're listening, the Killer Clowns creator, I'm really proud of you for seeing that script through, because that process is hard. Finishing a script is hard. Making a movie is hard, and you did it. I am proud of you, Killer Clowns person. Thank you for your contribution to this world. Because now you're in pop culture.
Coffee all
Your
over
name
their
has
phone
been
right
invoked.
now.
You are remembered, Killer Clowns person. So thank you. Thank you for being remembered.
All right, so I just want to ask you one last thing is with your hectic schedule and everything, I know time is sensitive, but what are you working on now, and is there anything that you would like to promote and plug?
Yeah. So I'm working on a card game currently called Deck of Wonders. We just had a successful Kickstarter launch, yay! And we're basically paving the way to get that game out into the world, into people's hands. So keep an eye out for that. If you want to support, the game, deckofwonders.com. The Kickstarter is still taking late pledges, so if you're interested in getting yourself a game, please do. I also have just started a Patreon recently. So if you want to follow me, you can find me there at LAB Illustration at Patreon, basically. I am currently doing an October drawing challenge that I've made called 31 Boutiques, like the BOO boutiques. And it's basically, a shop per day of a different, description. And it's been a lot of fun so far. So if you're interested in seeing my work and, that project of my daily challenge, then, please feel free to follow me on Instagram. All my socials that are at Lab Illustration. So, just follow my journey and get snippets of the world that I was talking about before. Because I'm just injecting lore in each piece. So that's currently what's been going on for me. But keep an eye out and keep following this show as well, because this is an endeavor that I count that I also want to promote, even though you're already here. So please like and subscribe if you are interested in the things that I said and that we all said. So more content like this will be available very soon. Woo! Thanks everybody so much for talking to me today, though. This has been a lot of fun.